Late Dr. Zola Skweyiya, and I want to pick up the discussion, especially just around social causes and how passionate he was. I know you were still in the middle of sharing one of your stories about the late doctor.
Thank you, Paul. I was just reflecting on the fact that even though he was a person who had great standing and intellectual standing, he was also a man of action, I suppose quite similar to our president right now. And I was talking about how he helicoptered into this impoverished town of Mount Frere as a result of news that children were dying of malnutrition. His anger at officials when he discovered that even though these children were eligible for the child support grant, which was the state program to alleviate poverty, children just weren't getting it because officials were not processing the applications. And so I think that that's one of the overarching kind of legacies that he leaves as a man who cares, and a man who's committed to understanding the needs of people. We heard the Premier of Gauteng, David Makura, talking about his role in the constitutional negotiations, and for Dr Skweyiya, the constitutional, basically social security was primary because it was a constitutional right. Section 27(1)(c) of the Constitution says that everyone's entitled to social security. And he was someone who came in to an environment where there was quite a hostile and conservative view about social security. We heard earlier on the show that the legacy that goes back to 1909, that was predominantly for white and colored people when it was introduced. And so I think one of the things that for me was really interesting about Dr Skweyiya was that he was able to see where people came from. So at one stage I was asking him why there was a backlash against social security. There was a myth that social security caused dependency, encouraged young girls to have children, even though the evidence that he'd commissioned showed that that wasn't happening. And he said to me that one has to understand that stalwarts went into the liberation struggle so that their children would become professionals, would be doctors, nurses, accountants. And he said that the real sadness, if not bitterness, that many people felt was that social grants were the only alternative, were the only incomes coming into households. And so it wasn't necessarily that people were opposed to the Constitution, but it was the fact that it was, in a way, a kind of deferred dream, a deferred legacy. Indeed. And yet social security.
And if we can just quickly expand on that, I mean, one of his greatest wishes was for a more sort of comprehensive social security system. So not just looking at social grants, but he also wanted the incorporation of unemployment insurance. It really speaks once again to just what you're saying about how compassionate he was and how he wanted more for the ordinary people on the ground.
Completely. One of the last things I was going to say is that in addition to understanding the need to have jobs, he also understood deeply the need for income security, and that liberation meant, as President Nelson Mandela said, more than just the vote, it meant bread. And he was able to share that when he was in exile in the USSR, he lived in welfare states, and he was able to see the developmental aspect that had. And so in 2002, there was the release of a report.
All right. Please hold your thoughts, Isobel. There's a bit of activity outside the home of Zola Skweyiya, and we cross to our reporter, Sipo Stillman, and he's there. Very good morning to you, Sipo.